Your memory is quietly making you the hero. Ask a group of university students what marks they got a few years ago. Then check the official records. Most answers will not be complete fiction. Nobody suddenly remembers winning a Nobel Prize in Year 9 geography, but some scores will have improved during storage. A respectable result has been sitting in memory for 3 years, moisturizing, working on itself, and has now returned with better lighting. This sounds like lying. Sometimes, obviously, people do lie. The research cannot peer into each participant's soul and issue a tiny honesty certificate. But there is another possibility, and it is much stranger. People can report a flattering version because that is genuinely the version available to them. Your memory is not security footage. It is an editor, and you are the client who keeps receiving the hero cut. We talk about memories as if they are files. Open folder, select childhood, double-click the time you embarrassed yourself at a birthday party. Watch in horrifying 4K. Episodic memory does not work like that. Researchers describe it as constructive rather than reproductive. When you remember an event, your brain assembles a scene from stored details, general knowledge, emotion, and whatever cues are available now. That flexibility is useful. It may even help us recombine pieces of experience to imagine possible futures. But a system that rebuilds can also rebuild inaccurately. Memory is less like opening a video and more like asking a group chat to reconstruct Friday night. The main events will probably survive. The timestamps are fighting for their lives. One unusually clean way to study this is to ask people about results that can actually be checked. In one study, researchers verified self-reported test scores and university grades for 494 people. Accuracy dropped for roughly 2 years and then leveled out. When people in the lowest scoring third remembered incorrectly, their errors were much more likely to raise a result than lower it. Among the highest scorers, the mistakes were closer to balanced. The past was not receiving random damage. For some participants, it was receiving a glow-up. Another study split the problem in a clever way. For current university students, grade point average was still relevant to who they were now. Their older admissions test score belonged more firmly to the past. The researchers found different patterns. A tendency towards self-enhancement predicted greater exaggeration of current grades, but not the older test score. Distance through university predicted more exaggeration of the older score, but not current grades. They argued that present performance may attract motivated self-enhancement, while older performance is more vulnerable to ordinary reconstructive bias. In other words, your internal public relations department may have more than one employee. One handles active reputation management, the other handles archives, and occasionally misplaces a disappointing number. That distinction matters because memory favors me is not one simple mechanism. Sometimes people interpret the present in a self-protective way. Sometimes older details fade and get reconstructed from what feels plausible now. Sometimes we tell a story so often that the clean narrative becomes easier to retrieve than the untidy event. And nowhere is the hero edit more obvious than in an argument. Replay the last proper disagreement you had. In your version, you were calm. You had context. Your one slightly sharp sentence was a reasonable response to 17 earlier provocations, a difficult week, and the moon being weird. The other person's behavior, meanwhile, arrived without context. They simply chose chaos. Now ask them. A study interviewed 25 married couples about naturally occurring conflicts. Both partners tended to emphasize their own needs and hurt feelings, explain or justify their own behavior, blame the other person for starting the conflict, and describe the partner's behavior as irrational. That study did not have objective footage proving which spouse was factually correct. It examined the shape of their accounts, and the shape was wonderfully symmetrical. 2 people, 1 argument. 2 innocent protagonists trapped with an unreasonable guest star. The edit can also change how a memory feels. In another experiment, participants recalled events involving pride and shame, plus events involving admiration and contempt towards other people. Positive self-evaluative memories, the pride stories, were experienced with more subjective detail than shame memories. That positivity bias did not appear in the same way for evaluations of other people, and it was stronger among participants with higher self-esteem. That does not mean a vivid memory is automatically false. Vividness and accuracy are not mortal enemies. It means vividness is part of the experience of remembering, not a notarized certificate attached to the event. Your brain can hand you a scene with color, emotion, and surround sound. The production value tells you how convincing the memory feels. It does not independently verify the script. This is why calling yourself the unreliable narrator of your life is funny, but only partly right. Memory is not useless. You remember people, places, skills, promises, and thousands of ordinary details well enough to function. If memory were pure fan fiction, every morning would begin with a deeply confusing cast list. The problem is confidence without receipts. When a memory matters, an argument, a promise, who said what, whether you definitely submitted the form, use external evidence if it exists. Check the message, find the photo, read the calendar entry, ask what the other person remembers before announcing your version like the final episode of a courtroom drama. And if there are no receipts, leave a little room around the story. Maybe you were reasonable. Maybe they were unreasonable. Maybe two reconstructive memory systems independently released competing director's cuts. That tiny gap of uncertainty is not weakness. It is intellectual quality control. So the next time you remember being obviously right, completely calm, and unfairly misunderstood, enjoy the story. Just check who edited it. Your memory did not necessarily invent the past. It may have selected the flattering fragments, restored your best lines, and quietly removed the scene where you sent K with a full stop. Everyone gets a hero cut, including the person who still thinks you were the villain. Subscribe, and we will keep investigating the suspiciously convenient stories your brain tells about itself. You will probably remember agreeing with all of this. Your internal public relations department is already drafting the statement.